Today, I am so pleased to be joined by Kate Wasner. Kate is a self-advocate who was diagnosed with autism at a young age. She's very passionate about autism advocacy, chess, science, and all things ABA. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kate. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Eileen. I'm really excited to be here as well.
Let's jump right in then.
All right.
How did your early diagnosis of autism shape your understanding of yourself?
Okay, so I have a very unique experience when it comes to autism because I'm pretty much a minority within a minority. Because as boys, are like 4 times more likely to be diagnosed than girls. And then, a lot of girls, aren't diagnosed until later. But I was one of like one of the unicorns because I was diagnosed when I was 2 years old. Um, and this was back in 2001. And the perception of autism back then was so different. I know my parents had taken me in for an evaluation, um, you know, and I met the criteria for autism, after like hours of like, tests or like they just observe me like talk like or like interacting with my mom in one of those like what is it, one-sided mirrors, or I can't remember what it's called, but it's like or it's but it's like they could watch us, but like we couldn't see them. um the doctors told my parents, they said, she has a 50% chance of speaking and a 20% chance of even being able to somewhat remotely live on her own. So, those statistics were not very optimistic. And they were basically like, yeah, you're just gonna need to find like an ABA therapist. And like there really weren't a lot of resources back then. But thankfully, I my parents were very resourceful and they managed to connect with other, parents within the autism community. Because I'm from Kansas City. And like a lot of the parents, like it basically like, if you have a kid with autism, like you're gonna be friends with like all the other parents. And my parents met, families, who, did benefit from, you know, ABA therapy, early intervention, and they were like, you know what, I think she might actually have a chance. So, I started, I my parents, were fortunate enough to, be able to pay out of pocket because this was before any like autism legislation was enacted in any of the 50 states. So I think I've always kind of seen it, as like whenever I'm struggling with anything, it's like, the doctors told me I wasn't going to be able to talk or live on my own, and look at me now. Like, I think that's just kind of I don't know, it's kind of like what is it? I use it like it inspires me, I guess. It's like, if I could overcome that, I could, overcome anything. And when I say overcome, I don't mean like overcoming autism. Like I obviously know, like the autism doesn't go away. But it's like, being able to navigate the world and, being able to cope. Cause like, and I think being early diagnosed, like even though, by the time I was in kindergarten, I was completely integrated into like, public school. I was even like, in like the enrichment class. Uh,
Right.
yeah, like I was like, I was like able to read when a lot of my classmates couldn't. But but I always, felt, different, and I knew there was something different about me. Because I still, even though I hadn't done ABA, like once, I went into school, I wasn't doing ABA. But I did have, speech language pathologist because I still did have a couple of speech impediments. Um, And so I knew like something, something was different about me, but I didn't know what it was. And I would like be pulled out of class and like, sometimes like for 10 minutes a day, I would go into like the sensory room with like an occupational therapist at the school and just either like jump on the trampoline or, sit on bean bags, just kind of a way to decompress throughout my day. Um, and and so I always and I think the other students could tell too. Like students just could tell, I was very sensitive to things. Like the fire alarm especially was something that was
Oh,
so hard for me. Like it genuinely, like if a fire alarm goes off, like I perceive it as like I am like in physical pain. I perceive it the same way that, somebody like I would feel, if somebody just like, you know, stabbed me or something. Um and it eventually got to the point, where like I just could not handle it anymore. And even in high school, I had to like they would like tell me, it's like, Kate, there's gonna be a fire drill today. You can go outside like 5 minutes early, because basically they knew that, I like if there was ever a fire, I'd be smart enough to get out. But it's just like the alarm and just the combination of the alarm and the light was so just horrible.
I remember I have a very, very vivid memory of being very young, like 5, and crying because of the fire alarm. And in France, I would say like they don't really do gentle parenting, and if you're not
Yeah.
like, doing what they say, I mean, I remember the teacher being so mean about it, and it made it even worse. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, that's the impression I got like from your books, and also just kind of what kind of just what I know like about like American culture versus like European cultures. But yeah, so I actually didn't find out I was autistic until I was 7. Um so I knew what the word autism was. I knew it was some sort of disability that made you like think differently, because there was a student in my class, who conveniently happened to also be in the speech, be taken out like by the speech pathologist 10 minutes a day and go to the sensory room with me. Um, and like my mom had, I think I asked my mom, was like, why is like so and so upset over this? And she explained to me, that he had autism, which made him think a bit differently. But she had it, like I didn't know that I also had it. But I think, it's I mean, I'm glad my parents told me like early on. Like, I feel like, if they had told me when I was like 3 or 4, it's like I'd be like, what? Like I
What?
wouldn't even know what that meant.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about ABA, and
Oh
do you
yeah,
have
for
any
sure.
advice for parents who might be considering ABA therapy for their children being autistic yourself?
Yeah. So my advice would be and I know this is going to sound a little ironic considering that, we're talking on a Spotify podcast, that's probably, going to be linked on social media. But I would advise parents, to try and limit the amount of social media they use when it comes to finding resources. Um, like a good example is Reddit. Like I mean, Reddit is great for a lot of things. I know people have like literally cited Reddit posts in academic papers. But like, there's so much like fighting. Like, you could literally say the sky is blue and somebody would fight with you about it. And I mean, with ABA, I mean, I've seen like all of it, I mean, you're gonna hear people say that it's, equivalent to, like child torture. And then you have others be like, oh, that's just BS, which I mean, it is BS. It's not, I mean, but it's like, parents aren't going to be able to know like what's true and what's not. So I think my suggestion would be for them to, talk to like a pediatrician, talk to a child psychiatrist, like talk to, people like who actually have credentials and, ask them, like is ABA right for my child? And I mean, in some cases, I mean, I'm not saying, every autistic child should have ABA, I think different treatments work better for different people because, we're all different individuals. But and I would also say with parents, like 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 know that like you are doing the best for your child, and like, some stranger on the internet who doesn't know you has no place to tell you that you're like a bad mom or a bad dad. I mean, I see so many, I mean, I've seen like the comments that you've gotten, I've seen the comments that so many other parents have gotten, and it's just disgusting. Like at this point, it's like, who's being abusive at this point? Like, you know,
Seriously.
yeah. So I would say, for parents to probably like limit that kind of interaction, because it can be very detrimental to to like anybody's mental health. And that's kind of why I have, uh taken a step back from, social media, because I mean I mean, I've never, like publicly stated my opinions, like as, my full name, like Kate Wasner, supports ABA therapy, like because I was so terrified of, the backlash.
I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, and I would say I think my third piece of advice would probably be, for the parents should be present, in um the ABA curriculum, definitely work with the RBTs and the ABA therapists, and be like proactive. Because there are bad apples in every field. And I mean, one of my first RBTs actually was not good, and my parents fired her on the spot. She fell asleep during the job. When I think my parents were, I think I think like they were out of the house for some reason. I think like because my brother had just been born, and I know had like jaundice or something, so I think they took him to the doctor, and like, my RBT was like working with me, and they trusted her to, look after me, and she literally fell asleep. And you have this like little 2-year-old girl running around, and that's so, I mean, obviously, that was not, a good experience. But I have had so many great RBTs. Like I am still really good friends with quite a few of them to this day. Like one of them, like I literally like have like I just will like text one of them like in the middle of the night, be like, hey, what's up? You know?
Oh, it's so nice. So you would say that your experience with ABA as a child was positive overall?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I think, and I think the thing is, it was the way that it was done, and the fact that, my parents were so proactive. Um, I think, one of the misconceptions about ABA is that when like people hear like 40 hours a week, they think it's just that some people will operate under the assumption that it's like some sort of like boot camp training for like 40 hours, and it's nothing like that at all. Literally a lot of it is just like play
Okay.
based, yeah. And I mean, and one of the other misconceptions about ABA is that whenever you talk about like, oh, my ABA is like completely play based, some people will be like, oh, that's not real ABA. They have to call it ABA to, get it covered under insurance. But here's the thing. As I said before, I was diagnosed in 2001. I started ABA in November of that year. Autism insurance, like reforms, were not a thing at the time. So I was
Very
doing
good
play-based
point.
ABA therapy before this legislation was even enacted. But like my BCBA, he was a professor at the local community college. He very, respected psychology professor. And so a lot of the RBTs were like his students. Like he basically just like asked them, like, hey, do you want to like volunteer or like have a part-time job, working with autistic children? You're gonna need some training, but like the outcome is like really rewarding. And the ones who said yes, a couple of them, uh became my RBTs. Um and I think, I think they were just so patient and gentle with me, like I saw them like as my babysitters, sort of. And I think, um, and one thing that really helped is the fact that my parents, and my ABA team made sure to integrate my interests. And
Yeah.
that's like they did not try and change who I was, like as a person, they were but they used those interests, to help me learn tools to better navigate the world. Like I never once did I feel, and I'm speaking from my memories as, like a 4 or 5 year old, because I cannot remember like being 2 or 3. I feel like a few vague memories from then, but not much. So like I was very much into Disney and I still am. So like my dad would stay up late at night, he would write these like little like booklets for me. You I'll have to like look back. But yeah, no, it was like with like the early 2000s Photoshop and the Comic Sans font. Um, and like there was he would like integrate, like Disney characters into, like some of the, skills that I needed to learn.
Oh, that's so great. Your parents sound awesome. So
No,
supportive.
they were. No, my dad actually was involved in getting autism insurance passed in Kansas and then also throughout the country. Because he actually used to work for Autism Speaks. He now works for the Council of Autism Service Providers.
That's,
So like when I was younger and stuff, like I would go to a lot of those autism walks.
do you want to talk about your experience in graduate school and like any strategies that have helped you through it?
Okay. Yeah. So I applied to graduate school in fall of 2022. I majored in math during my undergraduate. And I originally wanted to do biostatistics, because I was really interested in the intersection between like math and, scientific research. But I felt that biostatistics was a little bit too narrow for my interests because a lot of it is just like probabilities and, like I kind of want to do more like fun, like computer stuff. So data science was a really good option for me. And um, so like it is definitely very hard work to get into graduate school. You have to write a really good statement of purpose. And you have to find, 3 people to write like a letter of recommendation for you. So that was probably the most anxiety-inducing part, because, like, one of my recommenders literally submitted the letter, like, at 11:59 right before the application deadline.
Jeez.
Um, so it's, kinda knowing, like, how much, like, noise you can tolerate, because, like, I remember during one of the first weeks of grad school, me and my friend were studying in the student union, which is really, really loud, and there's a bunch of, like, different, like, chain restaurants down there, so, like and, like, the chairs were just they were, like, these wooden benches, and it was just not comfortable, and, like, the smells were getting to me, and it's like, "Why would anybody wanna study here, and why is this ranked the number 1 study spot in this university according to, like, her campus and Reddit?" But, so I think just kinda knowing your limits and knowing kind of finding, those little spaces that you feel the most comfortable in. And for me, so there's like a dozen, libraries on campus. And I found, one library that's near my apartment. I found, uh, you know, a quiet spot there. And I'm not sure if you know about this, but so the law library at the University of Michigan, literally looks like Hogwarts. Yeah, it was actually one of the places they considered filming the whole series. But yeah, so that's like a cool place to go to, because it's like super quiet, but it's also like a little too quiet. Like if you make a single noise, like everybody's just gonna glare at you. A lot of
That would
these
stress
people
me
are like,
out.
because a lot of these students, if you've seen Legally Blonde, you know that law school is pretty intense.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice. Thank you so much for sharing. And finally, do you want to share a little bit more about, because you told me that you like math and data science,
Yes.
all of
So
that. So how does this relate to autism and your advocacy?
okay. So when I was an undergraduate, I volunteered at Spark. There was a Spark lab, at my university, Spark for Autism.
Mhm.
And I worked, on like computational, like research. And I would like perform statistical analyses on, the data that was being provided to me, whether that was like survey data, and or like, genetic data that all kind of had like anonymized IDs. So like you don't know whose sample it is, but it's just but you can but like the idea of it, and that's like a distinct person. Um so I was introduced kind of to, uh so that was like my first like introduction to bioinformatics. And I was really excited, to be able to apply a lot of the skills that I learned, as a math major. Like I did a lot of like um I did like t-tests, I did like I think I performed like I did like dimensionality reduction, stuff like that. And it was just so cool, to know that, even though, I'm just like doing this as volunteer work, I'm I'm contributing even just a little bit, to, the advancement of autism research. And I knew that, I wanted to do something related to that, going forward. So and the thing is, autism research is so broad. I mean, like I mean, you have the one component where people are looking at like different genes, that might be affected, that might affect, you know, autistic individuals, at a higher rate, kind of seeing like like um like studying, like epigenetic factors, studying, like parental inheritance. But then you also have like the social aspect, or like the um because I mean, like research isn't just, like DNA and stuff, it's also like researching, like quality of life for people with autism, um and that's actually some of the research that I'm doing right now for my summer internship. um so I'm actually researching, well, um I have like a mentor that I'm working with, and I've actually known her for over 10 years. Because so another thing I actually forgot to mention is that when I was a teenager, so there was a program in Kansas City, for girls with autism called Girls Night Out, where it was like you would go like once a week, and just like hang out with girls with autism, and we would do like different social events. Like we'd go out for coffee, we'd go to the mall, and we'd work on like, different social skills and different like self-care skills. Because at that time, it's like I don't it was, like, really hard for me, like, I did not know how to put my hair in a ponytail. I had a hard time. I could not, like, makeup was sensory hell for me. I didn't know how to color coordinate, and, that, like, that program, it kinda helped me kinda, know, kinda, like, I guess, kind of gave me tools to, survive as being a teenage girl. Because being a teenage girl sucks. But it was definitely really, really helpful. So I'm working with her now, like as, an adult. And and we are researching, the social, competence, and the social emotional health, like anxiety and depression of adolescent girls with autism. And we're trying to see, if that like increases over time, because like something that previous research has noted, even though there isn't a lot of research on teenage girls on the spectrum, but there are, what is it, um like but like there have been, it seems there seems to be a pattern where like girls tend to struggle a lot more in their adolescence than they did during, their school years. And I mean, that was that way for me. I mean, like even though like I felt like, I had a lot more, difficulties. And I think a lot of that has to do with like, going through puberty, dealing with like a lot of changes, um and you know, I think it's really important, you know, to do that research, because you know, I mean, a lot of like girls, you know, like I mean, or a lot of teenagers I know like struggle with anxiety and depression, and you know, sometimes, you know, I don't want to get too dark. It's difficult. And you know, I think and I just like and so I think that research is so important to do, you know, to try and, you know, make things better for, you know, teenagers, you know, with autism, you know, who don't feel like they belong anywhere, you know. So I think on one side, you know, you kind of have like the hard sciences, and on the other, you have kind of like the psychological, the social aspect. And I think both these are equally important when it comes to autism, you know.
Really amazing everything you're working on and how you're tying your special interest into autism advocacy. Before we go, do you want to tell people, if at all, where they can find you online, where they can contact you, and all of that?
All right. Okay, so my social security number is okay, just kidding, just kidding. Yeah, but no. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I think you can just like type in my name, Catherine Wasmer. And that's like really the only social media that I use.
That's
you
the
know,
way to do it. LinkedIn, it's the professional one where they're forced to have, respectful conversation. So if you want to talk about autism, I feel like LinkedIn is the way to do it.
oh,
if you
for sure,
do it.
for sure.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your life and, advice for our followers. It was really nice.
Thank you so much.